Good evening and welcome to my presentation. My name is Patricia Gonzalez, and today I will be discussing a Franciscan approach to immigration as described in the Old and New Testament. Introduction. Immigration is an important issue to discuss because it represents a crisis that affects everyone in this world. The Catholic Church is faced with the particular challenge of how to handle the influx of immigrants, particularly in the United States. This challenge is affected by the historical relationship that the Church has with immigration, both in ancient and more recent times. Although immigration is a more pressing issue today than in other times of history, the Church has always had a straightforward teaching on immigration. This teaching centers on the importance of protecting human rights, especially in those demographics that are most vulnerable, such as immigrants. Saint Francis of Assisi was a medieval saint who began his life as a wealthy merchant's son. He lived a frivolous life in his early adulthood and shunned the people who were lower status than he was, such as the lepers. But one day, Francis's heart was converted, and he kissed the face of a leper and tended to his wounds, demonstrating a care for all creation, not just the powerful and rich. After his conversion, Francis grew so much in love with the creation all around him that he wrote a canticle of creation, praising God for all the wonderful creatures and people he had created. This care for creation became a staple practice for Franciscan theology and can be used in the treatment of those who are struggling like the lepers, the immigrants of today. St. Francis' popularity and followers grew as he lived his life in a radically different way than was expected of the people of his time. One of these followers who appeared after St. Francis's death was St. Angela of Foligno, who had a dramatic conversion in her life, much like St. Francis did. Angela of Foligno came from a wealthy family, and the goal of her life was to live according to worldly desires, chasing after wealth and status. However, Angela had a conversion and her heart changed, leading her to confession, where she confessed her sinful lifestyle. When her family members died due to the plague, leaving her a widow, she joined the Franciscan order. Her heart desired to care for creation, and she began to clean and take care of the lepers in her community, just as St. Francis had done. Thesis. A Franciscan ideal is care for all creation, which is expressed in the scriptures through the topic of immigration. In the Exodus story and in Ruth in the Old Testament, love of all creation is portrayed in the way immigrants are dealt with compassion, as God cares for the wandering ancient Israelites and alien converts to Israel. In the New Testament, care for all creation is seen as Jesus teaches in Matthew and Luke, love of the immigrant through love of thy neighbor and care for the necessitated. Care for creation in the Old Testament. Exodus. Immigration in Exodus. The first place that we will look to in order to investigate how the Old Testament approaches immigration is by reviewing the book of Exodus. The book of Exodus tells the story of the Hebrews who, under the enslavement of the Egyptians, were set free by God through the leadership of Moses. It is important to begin at this starting point for the Exodus story when analyzing for immigration because it places the Hebrews in a position of displacement. Although historians believe that the group of Hebrews that escaped Egypt was much smaller than described in the Bible, and the parting of the Red Sea a less fantastical event, it is agreed that these events did occur in some capacity. What is also known is that the Hebrews willingly departed from the Egyptians' land to their freedom, but they did not know where their new home would be and became wanderers in the desert for a long period of time. Much like the immigrants of today's reality, the Hebrews roamed the deserts searching for a better home and were strangers to the new lands they encountered. Hebrews as our spiritual ancestors. The Hebrews of Exodus found themselves wandering the earth, having escaped the unthinkable reality of slavery. In today's world, immigrants are also escaping unthinkable realities. Some are running from poverty, others from violence, and they are all looking for a new beginning like the Hebrews were. Not only do immigrants of today share the experience of displacement with the Hebrews, but the Hebrews are also related to all of us via spiritual ancestry. These meandering Hebrews became the Jews who followed Jesus, who became the Christians who founded our Catholic Church. This deep connection to the Hebrews should serve for us to meditate on how we look at ourselves and the immigrants in our midst, as they are reflections of our spiritual ancestors from Exodus. Immigration in Africa and Exodus. In Africa, there is an immigration movement of people searching for a better life, much like the Hebrews in Exodus. Also, like the Hebrews, they are seeking to escape unfair living conditions such as war, natural disasters, and violent conflicts. Africans are undertaking dangerous journeys across the Mediterranean Sea, similar to the perilous journey faced by the Hebrews across the desert. African immigrants risk their lives on this journey with the hopes that their new home will offer them better living conditions and the opportunity for a better education. However, the heartbreaking reality is that despite these great efforts to escape unfavorable living conditions, many of them end up in human trafficking or terrible working conditions. Church response to immigration. So, how can we interpolate what the church's response to immigration should be today? One need only look at Moses' example in Exodus. When God sent Moses to the Pharaoh to ask him to release the Hebrew people, Pharaoh did not initially cede. Moses responded by telling him to let my people go. We as Catholics, members of the Church, are called to be like Moses and speak on behalf of those who have no voice, the immigrants. When we see injustice happening around us, we must also shout out against it like Moses did, because the Church's role in immigration is an intercessory one. We as the Church must hold fast to our morals and seek to raise the morals of the world. If we go along with whatever attitude is trending at the moment, we will lose moral authority as the Church. Care for creation in the Old Testament. Ruth. Immigrants in Ruth. Another Old Testament scripture related to immigrants is the book of Ruth. This book is important to the Old Testament immigrant analysis because it tells the tale of an outsider, Ruth, and how she was redeemed through her virtue. Ruth is depicted as a woman of valor, and although she is a Moabite, she is depicted in a positive light. Moabites were the enemies of Israel and Judah for a period of time, so it is unusual that someone of her background be depicted favorably. It is thought that Ruth's story is included in the Bible because it is recorded that King David was her great-grandson, and a positive story linking the valorous Moabite Ruth to David helped explain how someone of his background could become king. It is important to note that in this story, Ruth has a close relationship with Naomi, her Israelite mother-in-law, strengthening the love for immigrant theme in this book. Immigration as integration. In the Old Testament, immigration is treated in two different ways. On some occasions, immigrants are viewed as a threat and with fear, while in other instances, such as with widows and orphans, they are treated with protection and welcoming. Since Ruth is a widow, it follows that she is seen as an immigrant who is welcomed rather than feared. In addition, Ruth's journey back to Israel with Naomi is depicted as not just a physical journey from one city to the next. The very Hebrew word that is used to describe her return to Israel is a word that indicates a spiritual movement as she heads towards conversion to the God of Israel. Importantly, the journey has a purpose aside from conversion, and that is the integration of Ruth into the Israelite community as one of them. This acceptance of outsiders into our midst is an attitude that can be applied to immigration today.